There's a scene that takes place 26 minutes into the original Rocky movie. It's not a long scene. You could almost blink and miss it, in fact. It's a scene where Rocky and Paulie go into the bar. They each order a beer, and when the bartender turns his back, Paulie grabs his beer, takes off so he won't have to pay. The bartender gets pissed off, but Rocky says, "It's okay, don't worry, I'll pay for his too." So then, it's just Rocky and the bartender. They're watching the local TV news, and a story comes on about heavyweight champion Apollo Creed announcing his world title defense against the number one contender that's going to take place in Philadelphia on the first day of the bicentennial year, 1 January 1976. In terms of the construction of the narrative, this scene's main purpose is to introduce the audience to the character of Apollo Creed. So we hear him running his mouth for the reporters a little bit, and we ascertain very quickly that his personality and his speech patterns and his mannerisms are all based fairly directly upon Muhammad Ali, who was still the real world heavyweight champion at the end of his second reign when the movie first came out. But it's what Rocky says to the bartender while they're watching the TV that offers a window, I think, into why this character, Rocky Balboa, the everyman Philadelphia club fighter, wound up striking such a chord with movie audiences and becoming not only one of the most iconic characters in American film, but in many ways, an encapsulation of the American character itself. So they're watching the TV, and they're listening to Apollo do his little song and dance, and the bartender says, almost under his breath, something along the lines of, that Creed, he's good for nothing. He's just a loudmouth. He just talks a big game. And Rocky gets really pissed off by that remark, and much to the bartender's surprise. He says, "What the hell are you talking about, man? That guy is the champion of the world. He got himself an opportunity, and he worked his ass off to make the most out of it. And you shouldn't talk bad about a guy like that." And in just those quick couple sentences, Rocky Balboa, though he was never accused of being a Rhodes Scholar, he demonstrates a broad understanding and appreciation of the greatness of America. He understands that this is the land of opportunity, a land where if you get one big break at just the right time and take proper advantage of it, it can be the difference between a life of anonymity and a life of fame and wealth and stardom. But he understands at the same time that not everybody gets such an opportunity in their lifetime, and there's not really any rhyme or reason to it, but it's no reason to be embittered if you wind up being one of the 99% for whom that magic moment of serendipitous opportunity never comes. And so he's really bothered by it when this bartender speaks dismissively of Apollo Creed, because in Rocky's mind, a man like that who gets an opportunity and makes the most of it, he deserves nothing but respect. And it's a respect that doesn't arise from jealousy or envy or a sense of entitlement. The Rocky character never expresses any resentment about his lot in life, even though when we meet him, he's a 30-year-old club fighter with a career record of 40-22. He clears around $40 when he wins a fight, and he makes ends meet during the week by breaking fingers for the local loan shark at $20 a pop. He lives in a one-bedroom apartment, barely fit for human habitation, in a city that is the poster child for 1970s urban blight. But he maintains a generally positive outlook on life, and he doesn't think the world owes him anything. Now, even though there are 6 movies in this series, and 8 if you count the 2 Creed films, we don't really ever learn anything about Rocky Balboa's backstory. He comes to us fully formed, which is sort of how it is when you meet people in real life. You can know someone really well for many years and still not know major details of their life that happened before you knew them. And so it is with Rocky. In the first film, we learn his age and his career record, and in the second film, we learn that he quit school after 9th grade. And that's it. That is all the backstory we ever get on this guy. It was a couple weeks ago, I was sort of just aimlessly browsing Amazon Prime Video, and I stumbled on this director's cut of Rocky IV, which I didn't know existed. So I decided to watch it because Rocky IV is one of those childhood guilty pleasure movies for me. And I was expecting your typical director's cut, where they just insert some bonus footage or use an alternate take of a certain scene or something like that. But I was surprised to find that Stallone had actually gone back to square one and remade the film completely. It's a very, very different movie than the version you're familiar with, and I found it to be quite a lot better in every respect. He took out all of the goofy comedy stuff with the little kid, the stuff that I found cringeworthy even when I was 12. And also they got rid of a lot of the over-the-top Cold War stuff. And he inserted 3 or 4 scenes that were totally absent in the theatrical version. But anyhow, I was so pleasantly surprised by this director's cut that I wound up watching the whole rest of the series over these last 2 weeks or so. And I found it really fascinating watching those movies. Some of them for the first time in a long time, especially through the lens of 21st century racial and sexual politics. And my observations have as much to do with the character of Apollo Creed as they do with the character of Rocky Balboa. So that's what I want to talk about on this very special Thanksgiving Friday edition of the program. So hey, yo, Jimmy the Eagle, why don't you hit the music? From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we're battling armies of leftovers that will never defeat us. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. Now, the first Rocky movie begins shortly before Thanksgiving 1975. The first Creed-Balboa fight takes place just 5 weeks later on New Year's Day 1976. And the second fight, the rematch, the one where Rocky wins the title, that one's on Thanksgiving Day of that same year. So in the first 2 films, it's only 1 calendar year that transpires. The central conceit of the first film is that Apollo Creed, the heavyweight champion, has a title defense scheduled for New Year's Day 1976 in Philadelphia. It's being billed as a big patriotic extravaganza, the first big event on the first day of the bicentennial year. But then, barely a month before the fight, the guy who's supposed to be the challenger breaks his hand in training. None of the other top contenders are available to fight on such short notice, but they can't call off the event or else the promoter and the sponsors stand to lose millions. So it's Apollo Creed who comes up with the idea that in keeping with the theme of American patriotism, since this is, after all, the land of opportunity, let's find an unknown white fighter from Philly. And he stipulates right from the beginning that it has to be a white guy. And he gives him the most American of all opportunities, the chance to rise from anonymity and obscurity straight to the heavyweight championship. Now, the Apollo Creed character has 2 central defining personality traits. He has the loud-mouthed, bombastic braggadocio of Muhammad Ali, and he also is a fervent patriot who talks incessantly about the greatness of America. And I think a lot of people probably imagine that the flag-waving and the only in America shtick was borrowed from Don King by Apollo Creed, but it was actually the other way around. Don King only started doing that act after Apollo Creed had popularized it. So it's amusing to consider that when Rocky V rolled around, and the series would improve a lot if they just burned the negative on that one, And they had the character of the sleazy fight promoter who talks just like Don King. It was sort of a full circle example of art imitating life, imitating art. But from Apollo Creed's perspective, why was it so important that that opportunity be given to a white fighter? Because only in a country as great as America can a rich, powerful black man give the chance of a lifetime to a poor, anonymous white man. Now, this film is 45 years old now, amazing as that is. And look at how much our attitudes on race have actually regressed since then. Here in the 21st century, it's nearly inconceivable that a prominent black athlete would extol the virtue and the greatness of America, or make pride in the American ideal the cornerstone of his public image. And it is even more inconceivable to imagine a prominent black athlete of today suggesting that a white competitor has had less privilege and less opportunity than he has. You're simply not allowed to say such things here in the age of orthodox wokesterism. But then an interesting thing happens when the promoter first offers Rocky the chance to fight for the title. Rocky goes into the guy's office thinking he's going to be offered the chance to be one of Creed's sparring partners, and he's really excited about that. That's something he considers a great opportunity. And then the promoter says, "No, son, we don't want you for a sparring partner. We want to give you the chance to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world. So what do you say?" And Rocky says no. He says no immediately. He doesn't even hesitate in saying no. And when the promoter asks why, he says, "Because it won't be a good fight. I'm just some ham and egger. I don't deserve an opportunity like that. And my favorite thing about this scene is that money is never mentioned. Rocky turns down the fight without even asking how much money he stands to make because he doesn't care. He's turning it down as a matter of principle. So here we would expect the promoter to say something like, "But don't you realize how much money you're going to be passing up? It's going to be such and such dollars you lose out on if you say no to this opportunity." But he doesn't do that. Instead, he appeals to Rocky's patriotism. He says Apollo Creed wants to show the world that America is the land of opportunity. He wants to repay the opportunities this country has given to him by giving such an opportunity to somebody else. And then the camera slowly pushes in on Rocky's face. He doesn't say anything for a few seconds, but you can tell that he's probably reflecting on what he said to the bartender earlier about how we're defined by how well we take advantage of the opportunities that happen to come our way. So if I turn down this chance, if I pass up the best opportunity I'll ever get just because I don't want to be embarrassed in public, I'll be making a big fat hypocrite of myself. So he winds up taking the fight, of course. But it never enters his mind that he actually has a chance to win. At first, he doesn't even plan on doing any formal training. He just wants to last a few rounds and not get totally humiliated. It winds up being Tony Gazzo, the loan shark that he works for as a part-time finger breaker, who gives Rocky $500 so he can afford to hire Mickey to train him. And he encourages him to start taking the whole thing a lot more seriously. And eventually, he gets to the point where he's able to convince himself that, okay, I know I'm never going to be able to beat this guy, but I think if I really work my ass off and everything goes just right, I might have a chance to go the distance with him. And so that becomes the goal. Not to win, but to lose honorably, which, of course, he ultimately does. And as the decision's being announced, he isn't listening because he doesn't care. He just wants to see his girl. And speaking of that, just as these movies contain lots of racial themes and content that would be totally unconscionable in the woke cinema of the 21st century, Rocky and Adrian's courtship, particularly their first physical interaction, especially in the context of current-day sexual politics, it's probably fair to call it, by modern standards, pretty rapey. The first Rocky came out at an interesting moment in film history. The year before Star Wars came along and sort of reordered everything completely, but in the first half of the 70s, the trend in Hollywood had been toward unflinching realism, of making films that were not escapist entertainment, but which held up a mirror to the society and attempted to depict characters and relationships that were more like real people in the real world. And the most striking feature of Rocky and Adrian's courtship is how very awkward and unromantic it is. He goes by her work every morning and every afternoon, tries to sweet-talk her, but she refuses to say more than 2 words, won't even make eye contact with him. She only agrees to go out with him on their first date on Thanksgiving Day after Polly flips out and throws her turkey in the street that she was cooking for dinner. So they go to the closed ice rink, where Rocky pays the Zamboni driver $10 for 10 minutes of ice time after trying unsuccessfully to talk him down to $7. And then it's back to Rocky's place, where 2 times she says she doesn't want to go inside, though ultimately she does acquiesce. And then he starts taking his clothes off as soon as they get in the apartment, which, very subtle move there, Rock. But maybe he just wanted her to know the gun store was open for business. And then she asks him if he's got a telephone, which, in the days before cell phones, was a woman's way of saying, I'm sort of afraid I'm going to be murdered here. Which he doesn't. And then she goes on to say 3 times that she's not comfortable and wants to leave. She attempts to open the door, which he holds shut, pins her in the corner, relieves her of her hat and glasses, and then he goes in for the big kiss. Now, if you're looking for affirmative consent in this scene, I'm afraid you're not going to find it. So I imagine this would be pretty upsetting stuff to a pound me too wokester who's never seen the film before. She doesn't start acting like she's into it until he's got her on the floor already. And it's only in the last couple seconds of the scene that it takes on a character that could be described as romantic. Up until that point, it comes off as being somewhere between date rape and rape. But it is in keeping with that style of filmmaking that was in vogue in 1975, with that school that says realism should be valued over artifice. But when real men and women establish intimate relationships with one another in the real world, they usually don't resemble film romances. They are often awkward and uncertain, sometimes embarrassing, and affirmative consent never comes in the form of, "Yes, sir, I authorize you to copulate with me." Sometimes you just have to take your chances and go for it. So, as a condition of entering into an official relationship, Adrian demands Rocky quit fighting after the Creed match, which he agrees to do. He winds up receiving a payday of $37,000, blows most of it in cars and jewelry and fancy clothes. He flames out as a product endorser. He can't get an office job because his reading skills aren't sufficient. And before long, he's right back to where he was at the start of the first movie. The best he can do for getting work is getting hired for a week-to-week temp job at the meatpacking plant where Paulie works. But 6 months have gone by now since the fight, and a lot of people think Rocky won the thing. They think Creed was about to get knocked out at the end of the 15th, and he got saved by the bell. So Apollo starts thinking, shit, I can never get my reputation back unless I fight this guy again and beat him decisively. Rocky doesn't want to fight anymore. He wants to keep the promise he made to Adrian, but Apollo comes to him and says, "Stallion, I gave you an opportunity last year, and I need you to repay the favor now. I need you to give me the opportunity to reclaim my legacy by showing I can knock your ass out." Now, one of the scenes in that Rocky IV director's cut that I mentioned previously that was radically different from the original was Apollo's funeral, where they use a totally different, much longer version of Rocky's eulogy, where he spells it out and says, everything I have in my life, I owe to this man. He gave me an opportunity he didn't have to, that I didn't deserve, and then he gave me another opportunity, and then he helped me when I was down and out. Now, the entire Rocky Balboa story is ultimately the story of a famous, wealthy, powerful black man uplifting a poor, anonymous white man, which is the sort of narrative you don't often hear these days. Nobody in the industry would dare to even greenlight a script like that. Here in the woke Hollywood era, you can't tell a story about a black man empowering a white man, and especially not because he wants to demonstrate the greatness of America. That is just not the kind of story we tell in woke Hollywood. But the biggest reason that I think these movies and this character have resonated so strongly with the public for nearly 50 years now, to the point where Rocky Balboa is one of the most iconic film characters in the history of cinema, is how it subverts some of the standard tropes that you normally see in the tale of an underdog made good. The first and biggest departure from the standard formula, in the first film at least, is the fact that he loses the fight in the end and never had any expectation of winning it. He loses and he gets the girl, which, in a standard underdog success story, those two things are mutually exclusive. You only get the girl if you win, and you only get her because you won. And the other thing is, Rocky is depicted as a flawed man, who is not as good a fighter as he might have been had he applied himself better, who has to work odd jobs on the periphery of the criminal underworld in order to get by. Where in the standard underdog tale, the underdog is always morally perfect and flawless and totally above reproach. They've been unfairly disadvantaged by some set of circumstances beyond their control. But Rocky Balboa is a man whose condition in life is of his own making. He has made some bad choices, done some bad things, and he knows that. We never get the impression from this character that he thinks life has treated him unfairly, not even when he loses his house and his fortune and all of his belongings. He just straps his boots on each day and does the best he can with what he's got. And is there anything more quintessentially American than that? I hope you and yours had as delightful a Thanksgiving yesterday as we did here at Castle Curmudgeon, even though it was 80-some degrees with a Santa Ana blowing, which was pretty weird, but whatever. Must be climate change, right? Somebody call Greta, quick! So please do have a pleasant rest of the long weekend. I will be back here Monday. Until then, enjoy your leftovers. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.